Hola y un abrazo fuerte. Today we're going to talk about 21 things that you need to know before buying a house in Mérida, Mexico. This is not a list I found online. These are my own personal 21 things that I have experienced, and I hope this helps you. When you start looking for a house in Mérida, Mexico, of course you're going to start online. It's how we all search now. So I'm going to break down this content into things to look for online before you start looking in person, then the in-person stuff. All right, tip number one when buying a house in Mérida, Mexico is to understand that there is no MLS. That is a multiple listing service where everybody puts their listings in so that they're visible to everybody on all the websites. You will have to figure out which websites have reliable information. It's not that the others aren't reliable, it's that sometimes they're just not updated. When I first started looking, I would pepper my real estate broker with all these properties. And then finally I learned, but he was like, yeah, that sold 2 years ago. Sorry, that website is not up to date. And these websites are dependent on whomever they have updating them. So when they have a house sale go pending, somebody has to hand enter that. So there are lots and lots of good, reputable websites in Mérida. I'm sure you will find them. I'll link a few below. My personal favorite is Mexico International, but just understand there's no MLS. Tip number two when looking for a house in Mérida, Mexico is to use Google Maps. So for example, if you are on the Mexico International website, you see a house you're interested in, you've looked at all the pictures, click on the map, and that will take you to Google Maps. And that real estate firm in particular is good about actually putting the pin where the house is located. Not a generally located like some other websites will, but they'll pin that house. Makes it very easy to go Google Maps, and then you can start to click and drag your way around the street. Just understand that that image might be a year or two old. So in the upper left-hand corner of Google Maps, it'll say when the image was taken. It might be from 2022, and there's only so much information you can glean from that, but it's a good start. Tip number three, when you're in Google Maps, see if you can find a house that's on a non-bus street. Very hard to find, but pay attention to if you see images of buses, and then also understand that and ask your broker, some of those buses are going to be updated to the new electric buses. If you can find a house on a smaller side street where there are no buses, it's very nice. If you fall in love with a house on a street with buses, ask your broker if that is the electric bus route now, or look for one where the bedrooms are in the back. My house, the blue Cactus house, the bedrooms are in the back, and that was, on purpose for the guest experience. Another thing you can do to combat being on a bus street is, if you really love the house, it's like, forget about it. This is my house. You can put triple pane glass on the window and the doors. But Google Maps is a good place to start to see if the house is on a bus street. Tip number four when looking online for that house in Mérida, Mexico is when you're in Google Maps, see if there is a speed bump in front of your house. There's a couple kinds of speed bumps. They come in categories. But, the big speed bump that kind of spans the street, that's not so bad. But the reason I say that is you're going to hear the cars going thunk as they go over the speed bump. But I'm talking about the topes. The topes are those little rounded domes, and those are really loud. So you're going to hear the thunk, screeching brakes, things like that. So try to avoid having speed bumps or topes right in front of your house. Tip number five, while you're in Google Maps, see if there is a power pole right in front of your house. Now, of course, they're every couple of houses because all of the electrical is overhead in Mérida. However, if you can avoid having a power pole right in front of your front door, that's very nice. The power poles can be challenging for moving furniture in and out. And just, aesthetically, it's not as nice as if it's maybe right smack in between your house and the next house. That's a nice place. So just another thing to look for. Tip number six, when you're still on that Google Maps search, if you see a cantina on the corner and you think, oh my gosh, that's 2 doors away, it's going to be noisy. It's not noisy. The cantinas close early. And if you know, put it in the comment below. I'm not exactly sure what time they close. I think it's 10:30 p.m. But, you know, don't be alarmed if you see a cantina on the corner. I mean, heck, go down and have a drink and have some appetizers. Tip number 7, when looking for a house in Mérida, Mexico, we're now going to move to the preparing to look in person. Number 7, this is a big one, a buyer's broker. When you develop a relationship with a buyer's broker, stick with that person. Even if you want to see a listing that's not their listing, if you want to see a listing that's on a completely different website, just stay with your person. When you find that person, they'll work hard for you. I believe in loyalty. So if you find this other house, you can say, hey, broker Eric and Ivan, that's who I use. Can you call this agent and find out what the address to that is so I can start my little Google map thing. But have a really good real estate broker that's been in the business for a long time. Maybe you can talk with some of their other clients if you don't already have a personal referral. Woo! Tip number 8. This one is serious. An attorney. You need an attorney. It's not a big expensive thing like it is here in the US or maybe in your home country, but that's the attorney that handles the closing. They draft the paperwork. They search for liens. We'll touch on that in a minute. But having a good attorney is imperative and worth every centavo that you will spend on them. I personally like Balote and Associates. Luis Loria is my go-to person. He's saved me from making some mistakes and kept me from one purchase I really wanted to, but I guess it would have been a mistake. So I forgive you, Luis. Tip number 9, when you are investigating that house in Mérida, Mexico to purchase, is have your attorney look into liens. I mean, that's a given, right? They're going to look for that. But a lien on a house in Mexico is a very serious thing. Some are very easy to clear up because it has to go through certain generations of families first, and others are very difficult. Your attorney will look for the lien or the gravamen, and you won't be able to close on your fideicomiso without it. We'll touch on that in a minute. But I tried to buy a house in Mérida Centro, and I was in love. I mean, like, I was gutted. I worked for a couple years trying to buy this house. And my attorney, Luis, looked really deep into the paperwork. There was an old lien on it. We thought we could get it removed. We couldn't get it removed. So the sellers, and they couldn't even sell to a Mexican national as well. Like, this lien has to be removed before the house can change hands because it has an old government program tied to it that no longer exists. So it has to go like all the way to a court of law. They're not all that scary. Most liens can be easily satisfied prior to closing, but that is your attorney's job. Again, hence, get a good one. Item number 10 that you need to know when buying a house in Mérida, Mexico is that you will need to purchase it in a bank trust, a fideicomiso. It's not hard to do. The cost is approximately $550 every year to renew it. It's transferable if you sell the house, and you can will it to a family member or whomever you choose. And I have a whole video on that actually with my attorney, Luis Loria, and I will link that one at the end of this video. Tip number 11 you need to understand before buying a house especially in Centro of Mérida, is INAH, the Institute of National Archaeology and History. They're the ones that monitor keeping everything in line with the historical origin of the house. So if you're buying a house and it's in INAH, then permitting is going to take a lot longer. You cannot change the exterior facade, like you can't make windows bigger or doors taller. It has to be what it was in its original state. And even as much as inside the house, those really thick, like 2 feet walls, those are historically significant as they're part of the original house, and those will have to remain. So, you know, just ask yourself, do you have the patience, the time, and the flexibility to work with INAH? It's worth it, but it's going to take you extra time. Okay, before we get into the second half of this, please subscribe if you like my content. I greatly appreciate it. Leave a little thumbs up, comment. Let me know if you are looking to buy or rent a house in Mérida, Mexico. I would just like to know your story. Okay, now we're moving to the part of the video where you are in town now. You're on the ground and you're looking for houses. Tip number 12, choose your area first and the rest will follow. Determine what neighborhood, what location you want to be in, and then you can focus on that part. So I would go area specific first and then start drilling down into your house search. Tip number 13 is to understand the difference between the north of Mérida and the south of Mérida. There are big differences and traffic is a thing. So you just want to know what it is you're looking for. South of Centro, you can still get some pretty good deals in Ermita, San Sebastián, some near San Juan. And that would be, you know, south of 59 or even south of 65, and you're closer to the airport. North, you're going to get into some kind of mid-century neighborhoods like Garcia Jiménez or Itzimna, and then even farther north, some newer developments. And if the beach is going to your thing a lot, it's very easy to hit the highway up there to the beaches near Progreso. Tip number 14, this is a super personal one for me. When I'm looking for area, is I like to be walkable to a produce market. Like, I will revolve my search and my life around, can I walk to a produce market? Right now for me, it's Santiago Market. But if I was landing somewhere else, I would find the market and I'd kind of search 6 blocks radius from there. Tip number 15, when looking at houses in Mérida, Mexico, is if you can find one next to a little store, that's actually a really good thing. If it's a little tiendita or a guayabera store, a little mom and pop restaurant, those are really cool because one, at night they close, and there's always a presence there. But I love the fact that the Blue Cactus house is next to a guayabera store. So it's very nice to have a little local business next to you. And speaking of your next door neighbors, if you're going to make some changes that would affect their house, invite them over. When I was working on the Blue Cactus house, I went into the Guayabera store and I had them come over. We stood in the backyard. We talked about 2 things. We talked about their drain line that came off of the top of their store and how they wanted me to deal with that water runoff. And I worked with what they chose to do. And the other thing is they had a window and I wanted to be able to communicate to my guests what that window was. And turns out perfectly that it's a window that's really high up in one of the hallways and it's not a window that anybody would look out of. So I don't have to do anything that would, well, I wouldn't, but I'm not doing anything that would block their sunlight from that window into their store. And my guests can rest assured that that is not a window that's going to invade their privacy. So incorporate your neighbors if you're making changes that affect them. Which leads me to tip number 16. Examine the neighbors on the sides of you and see if they have like a towering like youth hostel next door, or a situation where they're going to be able to look down into your pool area. That can be really important to guests, the sense of privacy. So my Blue Cactus house, on one side of it, there are neighbors that could see over, but they can't see like into the pool or whatnot. They might be able to see like the top of the bar, but for the most part, the rest of it is super private. So just kind of examine what's going on with your neighbors and also understand that that can change. Tip number 17, if you see one of those houses where the sidewalk is really raised and then it goes back down, that's actually a good thing due to the rains increasing every year in Mérida. So if you find a house with that raised sidewalk, I think that's cool. Tip number 18, make sure your house has good drainage or the ability to change it to have good drainage. For a long time, my library house did not have good drainage, but we routed a pipe and did some things and made it so the water runoff didn't shoot out those little spouts into the backyard, into the pool area, and we rerouted it to go out and down the driveway. So that worked out great, but do examine for drainage. Tip number 19, ask your friends or whoever you referred you or your broker for a good architect if you're making some changes, and then ask to see a house that they've worked on, or a good builder, same thing. Ask to see one of the properties that they have worked on, and that will tell you a lot about it. Tip number 20, I think this one is hilarious. This is about pace. I move very fast. I can see a lot of houses in one day, not in Mexico. You cannot go down there and expect your broker to show you like 9 houses in a day. At best, you're gonna see 3. And that's because your broker takes you there, the other broker is usually there, and sometimes the family is there to open up. It just takes more time. Not everyone's on time. And set your expectation that you're only gonna see 2, maybe 3 houses in a day. And here's another thing. Don't judge a book by its cover or just on the details. Like the library house, it's a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. And I almost took it off the list when I was house hunting back in 2019. And at the very end of my stay, I said to Ivan, you know, let's put this one back on the list. I took it off the list. The photography wasn't great, which I totally don't understand. But I said, you know, let's put it on the list. I walked in and within seconds, I looked at Ivan across the room and I just smiled and nodded my head. And it was the best decision I ever made. Even though it took me 4.5 years to close on it. I have a video on that. Tip number 21 is absolutely my favorite. After you've made your little spreadsheet and you've got all your details and you just know exactly what you want, be willing to throw it out. When you find that house you love, throw out the list. Just do it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you subscribe, comment. Let's start a great conversation. And un abrazo fuerte. Besitos y cuídate mucho. Your desired neighborhood first and the rest. Blah, blah.